Hello and welcome everybody to today's session. This is the first in a series of webinars that Delv will be hosting with its partners on how we can help organisations navigate through the current COVID-19 pandemic. We'll just run through a bit of housekeeping first. The webinar is scheduled to run for approximately an hour. All participants will be muted and their videos off throughout the session. If you have any technical difficulties, please use the chat at the bottom of your screen and our host Jackie will be able to help you. Also, if you have any questions, there'll be a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So organisations the COVID-19 pandemic has created a real inflection point in society. And now more than ever, organisations are turning to technology to keep their people connected, productive and safe. But it's important that we're choosing the right technology and not just any technology. Some very interesting new data that's coming about is that there has been more digital transformation during COVID than there has been in the last 2 years. So some questions that we've been asking ourselves and that organisations I'm sure are asking themselves is, how do we now keep our employees engaged while they're physically distant but still digitally connected? And the next question is, have our processes changed and do they still work now that the way that we work has changed? So we've created processes thinking that we would have our employees all either co-located in one location where they can collaborate and work together. But now that's changed. Have we actually changed our processes? And the last is, are we actually adapting or just shifting the problem? So are we just expecting our employees to work longer and harder and just sort this out? So the problems that we're experiencing, they're nothing new. They've always been here. We've always had them. They've just been magnified now with the current COVID-19 pandemic. We've always had inefficient processes. We've always had staff that have been overloaded, doing manual, repetitive, high volume tasks. And now we're asking employees to work from home. And now they're being asked to work even longer because they're having to balance the whole work, home and family commitments. I know I have, and I'm sure many of you have been asked to, on top of our 8-hour day, to homeschool our children. And this is causing a lot of anxiety and stress, and it's impacting the well-being of our employees, and that's having flow-on effects and impacting our customers' experience and the business in general. So when we look at some of the tasks that humans typically undertake, they're doing a lot of, we're asking that they have used their creative skills and their human interactive, their soft skills, their collaboration, their problem solving skills, and they've been asked to do reporting, admin and some repetitive tasks. But I know when I'm looking for someone and the skills that I'm looking for are their creative skills. I want to know that they have creative ways of doing problem solvings and they're really good collaborators and team players. I'm not honing in on this, how good they are at sending emails or doing reports or doing high volume repetitive tasks. But as you'll see in this next diagram, what actually happens when humans get into these roles is that's where they're spending most of their time. They're spending a lot of their time doing repetitive, hydraulic tasks that are low value, and they're not spending their time doing the high value tasks. And I think now with COVID and employees being asked to work from home, they're actually being asked to do a lot more reporting and repetitive tasks because they still need to prove that they're being productive while they're working from home and away from the office. So how can automation help? Well, what automation does, as you'll see in this next diagram, is it will flip the pyramid. So now we have our digital employees performing those higher volume tasks like copying and pasting, moving information out of our legacy systems. They're doing the reporting and admin. And our humans can now focus on being creative and doing a lot of really great collaboration and problem solving. So we have each of our employees, the human and the digital, working to their strength. And that brings about job satisfaction. We now have employees that are highly engaged with the work that they're doing. And that flows on to a great customer experience for our customers and improved outcomes for the business. So at a high level, what is automation? For those of you who are not across it, it's what a human would do by executing manual tasks. So this is copy and pasting information. It could be moving data from one system to another, or doing reporting type tasks. So Delv has partnered with UiPath to deliver intelligent automation. And I'll now hand you over to Ken, who will talk about how UiPath is really leading the charge in the intelligent automation space. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome everybody to this morning session. What I'm going to do is just start off by talking about UiPath's vision, and there's a reason behind this. And the vision of UiPath is that in the future, you will have a robot or a piece of software sitting on your desktop, and it will monitor what you do in your day-to-day tasks. And then it will simply pop up and say, hey, I've seen you do this process, let's say 10 times. How about I now do it for you? And you might say, yeah, that's great, go and do it. Or you might say, actually, before you actually complete the process, I want to do a review and approve before you complete the process. And the robot will actually be able to understand that and then actually start doing that process for you. So, okay, just moving on with the slides there. So what is RPA? RPA is a piece of software that is designed to mimic what people do in terms of work. And so if you go and click on your Outlook and open an email and save an attachment, the software actually interacts or can interact the same way that a person does with a desktop. So it effectively clicks buttons, copies and pastes, can navigate screens, all those sorts of things. And it utilizes those existing, that existing interface to actually replicate what people do. Now, one of the differentiators though is it can also connect to back-end systems directly, and it can connect to systems like ServiceNow, so fault systems, or Oracle or SAP or Salesforce. It actually has connectors, and so it can actually connect natively to those systems. And another way to look at RPA software, if you're thinking about putting it in, is to think about the idea of a new starter in your team. So if you're thinking about putting a robot in your team, what you do is you look at a new starter and say, if I brought a new starter in, what I would do is I would train them on a process, and I would train them on straight through and the sort of standard variations. And then if the person didn't know what to do, I'd say, hey, if you don't know what to do, go and ask Joe. And then what you do is Joe would explain, okay, this is the business rule. And then that person could actually continue and do more and more processes. And then once you become proficient in that process, what you tend to do is you tend to give that person more and more processes to learn. And the same applies to a software robot. What you typically do is you develop it to do the straight through and some variations in the process. And the complex stuff that Joe was talking about is still done by people, but you still can build complex business rules into the robots. The robots are really good at and best suited for the repetitive, boring tasks that people just don't want to do. And so they do those tasks very quickly, and they don't complain, and they work 24 hours a day and don't take tea breaks or anything else. So that makes them very efficient. And in terms of what can they do, so I talked about being able to replicate what people do. So they can do the same sorts of things. I can extract information from a PDF. I can open an email. The robot can actually form the content of an email and send the email. It can receive a ticketing from a ticketing system and actually action that ticket. It can go and navigate web pages and applications and all sorts of things. There is pretty much not a lot of limit to what they can do. It really comes down to what they don't do is they can't problem solve by themselves. They're not creative. Their emotional intelligence is reasonably low unless you use an artificial intelligence system to support that. But essentially everything else that people do, they can do. And therefore those boring tasks are really good opportunities to move away from people. So just to touch on some examples of the types of things that robots are used for. So if I look at finance systems, so procure to pay or order to cash, record to report. So an example might be that you've got a finance team who receive invoices from customers. And what you do is you'll actually get the robot to actually take that digital document. So maybe that email that came in, it'll actually extract the attachment, save the attachment somewhere. It'll extract the data out of the attachment and go and put it into your invoicing system. And then when it's done that, it could actually go and flag to a human to either review it, or you might have a straight through process that says anything less than $1,000 to these vendors will just pay straight away. If there's a variation in spend of more than 10% from our previous billings, I want it to go to a person, those kinds of things. Other applications around reporting. So we've got customers who've actually got robots building and sending out the report. So once again, it's a mundane task that somebody often has to do on a weekly or monthly basis, and getting the robot to actually just build and send those reports. In supply chain, we see lots of use cases as well, particularly around inventory management. We've got a customer at the moment that does an inventory count every day and actually manually has to type the data from the tool that they've got that actually captures the information when they're actually doing the inventory check to their actual inventory system. So for them at this stage, it's been cost prohibitive to connect those two systems together. And so what they've done is they've got people who sit there and type in the information. And what we're doing now is the bot will actually take that information out of one system and type it into the other system. If I look at users in IT, typically what we see is IT applications tend to be well integrated. However, there are often still manual tasks. We've got one customer who has a robot, and what it does is it actually takes a spreadsheet, which is an order for a server in one of their data warehouses. And what that robot does is it actually builds the server, runs all the testing, creates the documentation around the testing and the results, and actually sends that to their customer saying, here, your server is ready to go. It was ready at this time, and here is the report and details of configuration and testing. We see a lot of application in HR, so particularly things like payroll. So often processes around things like changes to leave dates, changes to superannuation contributions. Often there are teams of people sitting there just doing manual processing, and these are really great opportunities for automation. Onboarding and offboarding is another area we see a lot of, and it's quite interesting because if you go into a new job, what typically happens is if your IT account isn't ready, you know, you'll ask your manager and they'll go and talk to IT and it all gets sorted out very quickly. But what typically happens in an organization when you leave, in fact, what often happens is those accounts and tools and systems that you've had access don't always get tidied up properly because it's often a very manual process. And in some industries, that's actually critical because they've got a compliance requirement to make sure that their employee details are all up to date. And if you've had someone leave the organization and yet they've still got access to your tools, it's a risk and a major compliance hazard. And so what we're seeing a lot is we're seeing bots who are actually going along and actually doing the offboarding of clients. And the final area that I sort of touch on is really around customer service. So we've got robots that are doing things like scheduling appointments. So the robot is actually hunting through calendars, looking for matching availability of people to coordinate meetings, right to simple things like password resets. Some companies have got some really great tools that do that. Other companies are still using manual processes. And the other real area where customer service comes in is the call center. And one of the really things that annoys callers in a call center is when you ring up and the person says to you, "Oh, can you wait a minute?" And you can hear them sitting there tapping away on the keyboard. And that kind of work just needs to disappear. You need robots to be sitting there copying data into multiple back-end systems. So use cases across all parts of a business. So what we're going to do now is just show a short video that actually explains a use case example.
Have you ever wondered what robotic process automation, or RPA, can do for you? In short, it provides a competitive advantage by helping you improve both accuracy and speed of operations while radically driving down costs. So how does it work? In this video, we'll show you how UiPath streamlines an invoice process end to end. You are about to see a robot performing the following activities: monitoring a dedicated folder where invoices are saved in PDF format, reading invoices from that folder one by one, extracting key information from the invoices, opening SAP, filling in invoice details in SAP, sending email notifications. Please note that the robot will do some activities in the background, such as most of the invoice-related actions, monitoring a folder or checking its email address. Now let's see it working. Right now, it's monitoring a folder where 3 invoices are stored and collecting all the information needed so it can register them one by one. It then asks the tester to introduce the email address where the posting notification will be sent, and also performs basic checks to see if the SAP is open and runs it on its own if not. Logging into SAP using its credentials, it then starts processing the invoices one by one. We can see it filling in data such as vendor code, invoice date, invoice number, invoice amount, invoice description, and GL account, and ends up by filling the payment term. Following that, it registers the remaining 2 invoices in the assigned company code. An email containing the SAP registration number is sent automatically by the robot after successfully registering each invoice. Checking in the background, the robot verifies whether the VAT on the invoice matches the one in our database, and if so, will post it automatically. Otherwise, it will park it and send a dedicated email to the responsible person highlighting this difference and asking what to do: post the invoice or to cancel it and send it back to the vendor. All the invoice's details are visible in the email it sends, so let's reply with yes to the message for an invoice with a VAT difference. Finally, it will check its email address in the background, access SAP using the appropriate transaction code, and post the invoice. And that's it. The robot has successfully posted the 3 invoices in SAP. Do you want to know more? We're happy to help. Contact us here.
So just continuing on, so what you saw there was a typical use case application for RPA. And I was working with a client yesterday, and they're actually talking, they've got 10 hours a day is actually spent doing a process just similar to that. So it's effectively about 1.4 FTE just sitting there doing that. The staff don't like it. And it's not a rewarding task, and it's a low value task to the customer. Yes, you do these processes, but do they really add value, and do they increase your customer engagement? And usually the answer is no. So at UiPath, what we talk about, and I talked earlier about our vision, we've actually got a number of different types of robots. And so we've got what we call an attended robot, which is a digital worker that will actually sit on a person's notebook and actually work together with that person generally. We also have a unattended robot, which is a robot or a digital worker that sits in the back office and just sits there doing processing. And there is actually a third model, which is an artificial intelligence robot, and it can actually be applied in either case. And what that means is that the way that humans and robots work together is becoming more and more interconnected. And so what you can have is you can have a work area scenario where just got humans, and that's what we're all pretty much used to the other extreme where there are robots doing work in the background. Now, in most cases, there's actually a blend. And what I can do is I can have my digital assistant, so the robot that sits on my desktop, is sitting there actually monitoring activities on my desktop. So it can actually sit there and monitor my inbox. And if it sees an email come from a particular addressee or has a particular subject name, it can automatically and in the background start processing that email for me. And what it might do is it might start to process the email, get to a certain point, and it'll pop up on the screen and say to me, hey, I've done this. This is what I've done. Will you check and approve it? And if I just click on something, it says yes, and then the robot continues working. And so that's kind of working in tandem. I can actually trigger that manually as well. So I can actually be working on something and say, I've got to do this. And we've got a customer that's got a process that takes a person 16 minutes to actually run through. It's a spreadsheet manipulation process where they have to actually update a whole bunch of fields, and they've got macros, and it's a complex piece of work. It takes a human 16 minutes. And what they do now is they actually push a button and start a robot, and it takes the robot the same 3 minutes to actually do that same task. And that's a significant saving because they do hundreds and hundreds of these every week. And then the other thing I can do is I can have my robot that's working for me on the desktop actually send something to a robot that's sitting in a back office. So a back office example might be something like insurance in claims or a home loan. So using a home loan example, you would send your supporting documents to the bank, and let's say you've got to supply 3 pay slips. And what happens is you accidentally only send 2. Now the robot can actually extract all the data out of the documents. It can sort of fill that data in systems looking at your credit profile and history and all that sort of stuff as part of your loan application. But then what it does, it says, hang on a minute, you haven't actually sent me the 3rd pay slip. So it actually goes back to you and sort of gives you a reminder. It can monitor that a couple of times, and then what it can do is it can actually then send a note to a person and say, hey, this person hasn't responded, maybe you should give them a call. And so that workflow is designed by the business, but actually operated by the robot. And then of course, when you send in your 3rd payslip, the robot can actually finish the process. Now, in the meantime, it can actually do work, but it finishes that process. And then once again, what it might do as a business rule is you might say, okay, now I need a lender to actually review all the information to actually give that final sign off. And then that person would then do that final sign off, and that could actually be partly done by the robot on the desktop, which then could actually hand it back to a robot in the background. So the way that humans and robot are working together is becoming more and more integrated every day. The other thing that this slide is what I'm going to talk about is really sort of why has automation really taken off in the last couple of years. And there's a couple of things that have driven that. And one is what is called low code. So to build a robot, particularly UiPath, actually uses drag and drop technology, which we're pretty much used to nowadays. So if I need to do something, I can just go and click on something, drag it into a flow diagram, and the robot is ready to process or follow that process. If I want to the robot to push a button on the screen, I basically say to the robot software, here, go and push that button on the screen. So I don't need detailed coding experience. The other thing is that the tool actually has a whole bunch of connectors that are already built in. So things like anything to do with AWX, Citrix, and those brands that are on the top of this slide, the interfaces are already pre-built and in the product. And then all the other icons that you can see, there's actually connectors that are available for those tools. And that means that I can drag and drop build to those tools without having to build interfaces. And often with major IT projects, a lot of effort goes into the design of those interfaces and the build so that you're getting those two systems to talk together. And that is a really good, it's a sort of like another use case for RPA in terms of data migration. So we see customers who've got mainframes where there is no APIs and no easy way to exchange data to the mainframe. And so you have people kind of filling that role. And it's very easy to get a robot to actually do that work for you. And you might continue to do that, and then when you replace the mainframe, you might have the systems talk together. So the robot can actually be the filler in between those systems. On top of all these sort of logos that you see here, there's a lot more than actually that we can fit on this slide. It's busy enough as it is. There's actually around 900 pre-built robots that you can go to a store and actually say, I'm looking for a robot to do onboarding and create an account in Active Directory. And you can actually go to that store and download it. And what you have to do is just do a little bit of tweaking around your system. And what this means overall is that from an RPA perspective, the speed to develop is much, much faster than typical IT approach. And that also has a flow-on effect that if your process changes, you can change the robot so much more quicker than what you can with a typical IT approach. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the platform. I might just answer a couple of the questions that have come up. So can the robots be deployed to staff laptops? They certainly can. And in fact, I have a robot running on my desktop that I use to do or assist me in a number of my tasks. PwC, for example, is actually running a robot per person across their whole business worldwide. And at this stage, from what I understand, has almost completed that project across the US and then moving more broadly around Australia. And Singtel, Singtel Optus are another company that's actually in the process of rolling out a robot to every person. So can I use these robots to interact via digital channels? And I might just cover that one in the next in the next topic. And do the robots work on mobiles or tablets? So at the moment, UiPath only works on Windows, in a Windows environment. However, you can actually do things like navigate on a tablet using a Windows interface and actually get automation to do that. The other thing that we do have is we have a tool where you actually manage your robot workforce, and there's actually an Android version of that tool so that you can actually control your robot workforce from your mobile phone or your tablet. So I might just move on. So looking at Gartner's sort of announcements and strategic view for this year, this is quite interesting because the #1 trend that they said was what they called hyper automation, and you might have heard a lot, this term used a lot in the press. And what is hyper automation? Well, it's actually taking all these sort of digital activities that we've all seen as part of a digital transformation and actually being able to bring it together to build an end-to-end automated view that will allow you to really kick off that journey in terms of the digital transformation automation. And to do that, you've got a whole bunch of tools. So, there's a lot of talk today around AI skills, machine learning, being able to mine your processes, look at advanced analytics, making it easier to integrate with systems, because all of these things bring their own set of challenges. And one of the things that Gartner said was that RPA is actually sitting at the middle of all of this, making this happen. And so it's interesting that, unfortunately for Gartner, that they didn't actually predict COVID. And so as Josephine said at the beginning of the presentation, what we're seeing is in the last 2 months, there has been more work done on digital automation than in the last 2 years. And maybe in your business, you've seen the same thing. So having to set up everybody to have digital access, looking at your manual processes or your paper-based processes, trying to figure out how you can digitize them so people can work remotely. And that's driven a huge amount of change. And what we're seeing today as we come out of COVID, or in Australia, we're certainly coming out of COVID, not everywhere in the world is as lucky as us. Businesses are now saying, well, the economy, we don't think is going to bounce back maybe as quickly as everybody would like. So how do I do more with less? I've built some of this digital stuff. How do I make it easier for more people to work from home? How do I get more efficiency out of my workforce? How do I get rid of this manual processing? And so at UiPath, we've actually got our platform that actually aligns with Gartner's hyper-automation strategy. And the great thing for us is we actually published this mid last year ahead of Gartner. And so what you've got, and thinking about that vision for the future, is we've got tools around discovery. So how do I go and identify processes, understand what's suitable for automation, and that automation can actually mean that RPA is not the answer to everything. You might go and automate something else, but being able to discover that there is an opportunity, measure it, get really scientific data-based discovery around those processes, and automatically actually be able to build documentation, automatically be able to build scripts that actually go and contribute either to your robot development or to maybe some other systems. The build stage is about making it easier. So at UiPath, we've actually released what we call Studio X, which is a version of Studio that actually makes it easy to develop. Now, while development is easier, certainly doing simple stuff is easier. What we find with clients is you need to bring in some expertise, because it's like learning a new skill. If you bring along somebody who's got that expertise up front, you can deliver benefits and outcomes much, much quicker. In terms of management, so you want to be able to manage your robot workforce and make sure that all your robots are licensed and doing what you want them to do. And there's tools that actually allow you to do that. We call it Orchestrator at UiPath. And then running, of course, running as the robots themselves. And you just want to make sure that the robots are easy to program. And in our case, well, we've got 3 different types of robots. The build and construction and maintenance and everything is all under a single platform using the same script. So it's very easy. If I build a process to log on to my core application, I can reuse that across any other process I build later on. And that really helps with implementation. Engage is about people and robots working together. So I gave the example of home loan application before and waiting for that 3rd pay slip. Now, what I can do is I can actually get the robot to actually go and put that action item, so for a human to check it, in a work queue. And as a worker, let's say the banker in this case, would actually get a notification that they've actually got a task that they have to do. And so they then go to a website, they actually complete the task, which might be just reviewing the data on the screen. Here's the picture of the documentation. Here's the data that we've extracted, even some description of the business rules. Here's a recommendation. Do you approve, yes or no? And you might just hit yes. And then of course it goes back to the robot to complete processing. And then finally, all of this you need to be able to measure. So we've got tools around measurement. You can do all your auditing, build your compliance reports, and the robots are great for that. Often we see customers, their compliance reporting or they've got gaps in reporting, and robots are great for that because I can measure what the robot did every time, every day. So just moving on. So how do I work out which processes I can automate? One of the tools that I use is Automation Hub. So this is people submitting ideas. So this is a tool that UiPath provide. And what it does is allow you to educate your business on being able to understand sort of what is possible, the art of the possible, and then actually be able to go and submit an idea online. And you don't have to know much about technology to do it. There's 9 simple questions that anybody can answer. And what this does is actually create a profile or a list of opportunities for automation. And once again, these may not all be completed by RPA. As part of the tool, there's an ROI calculator, because what we do is we recommend that you actually go and look at your return on investment. And even in this calculator, even though it's focused on cost, you can actually apply business rules around things like customer experience or compliance. So you might actually go and build a robot for a compliance reason and not just about return on investment. But certainly it's a key focus. And of course, you want to be able to centralize your documentation, so that the tool provides the opportunity to do that. It's got what's called a component gallery. So what you can do is with UiPath, you can create templates, you can create parts of automation processes, and it might be just that simple log on and navigate to a main page that you reuse 50 times. And so you create that as a component. So when a new idea comes in, you can look at it and go, actually, I've already got 3 components to do this, therefore my development time is a lot less, my return on investment is higher. The next thing that it provides is really a community. So the ability for everybody to submit ideas, but also share information, look at other things that have been built across your organization. And so it really builds and keeps focus on driving optimization and automation. And of course, the last one you can't do without is performance dashboards. Can I use automation to interact with customers? I think I've answered that one. My company has only done macros before, can Delv. I'll let Josephine answer that one. Another tool that comes in around identifying opportunities is what we call task capture. And this is a really amazing piece of technology. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to actually draw a flow diagram of your process. So if you're creating a new process, the easiest thing to do is draw up a flow diagram, and then you can actually record the steps on the screen that a person needs to do in each block on your flow diagram. And what the tool does then is it actually automatically creates a process design document, and we have customers that actually use it to create work instructions as well. And the other thing it does is exports the code in a skeleton form that you can actually start actually developing from straight away. The other thing it does, so I've got this opportunity to go and draw up my process flow to start with, or what I can do is I can simply sit there and record a process that a person does, and it actually builds the flow diagram from there. You can then validate that, and then once again, export it as a Word document. So you've got your process design document, you've got your process clearly designed, and you can export that skeleton, which you then take to actually start building from again. So sort of in summary, the priorities of a business really remain the same. We need to increase our revenue and lower our costs. And so RPA lets you do that because you can respond quicker to your customers, you can create a better environment, and of course you can lower your costs because you're moving manual processing off people into a much lower cost base. But the other thing is that what we see is that your employee engagement improves as well, because people enjoy their jobs because they're not doing that boring stuff. They're doing the things that are more interesting in their job. So customer satisfaction is a big one, being able to turn things around quicker, answer questions quicker, having a call center where when the thing pops up on the screen, the robot can actually get all the information and supply it to the agent immediately. So, you know, your history and everything else is there. The employee engagement I've already touched on. And the last one is reduce compliance risk. And this has been a big one, particularly for financial institutions with the Banking Royal Commission, needing to make sure that my processes are compliant. And so that leads to reporting, being able to audit what people do. And of course the robots only do what they've been programmed to do. So you know they're going to do the same process the right way every time. And that has a huge impact on compliance. And one of the interesting things is that some of the big auditing firms are actually using UiPath now to do that auditing process. And so it's very interesting that, or for us, that these big auditing companies are actually coming in and using robots to do this work, whereas they typically brought in a team of accountants to do it. So with that, I will hand back to Josephine.
Thanks very much, Ken. Okay, so now everyone's probably thinking, or the question on everyone's mind is, how do I get started? It can be quite daunting to think about that. So Delv has made it quite easy. We've got a pack that we've created to help you start on your digital transformation journey. And that uses the application that Ken was just talking about, Automation Hub and Task Capture by UiPath. So how can Delv bring this to life? We will be able to come in and help you get Automation Hub up and running. We can deploy and configure that for you. We can use the Task Capture software to help you capture some of your processes. The Automation Hub software will be used as your automation pipeline. It will allow all your employees across your organization to put in ideas for processes they think they'd like to automate. And then we can sit with you and go through each of those ideas and processes and provide some advisory around the ones that we think would be the most beneficial to your organization to start deploying first. We'll look at things on the return on investment. We'll look at things like what value and customer experience or risk compliance, what's most important to you, and then we can start helping you with the development side of things. So please contact us here at Delv and let us be the humans to bring your digital workforce to life. So we'll just get on to the Q&A section of our webinar. And just a reminder, at the end of the session, we'll be sending out a PDF version and a recording of the webinar. So I'll just go through some of the questions. One of the questions is, do I need to use APIs to get this working with my systems? Some of our platforms are quite old, don't use APIs, can I automate those? So absolutely, you can do that. There are pre-built APIs that UiPath had, and I think that screen that Ken showed earlier in his presentation with all the business or the organisations that have software with APIs connecting straight into UiPath, they are available. But that's the value, or that's the real clincher with automation, is that you can connect to all your legacy systems, because it's just interacting like a human would, and it can log on to your legacy system, grab information from it, and then bring that across to other systems in your environment. You call the next question we have here is, you call these digital employees. Are they designed to replace my staff or work with them? That's a great question, and it's certainly a question that everyone asks. No, these digital employees are not here to take over from humans. They are just there to work side by side with humans. So they're there to do the boring mandrolic tasks that no one really wants to do anyway, and leaving all the creative problem-solving skills to humans. And that just makes humans more engaged with the work that they're doing. And so definitely digital employees are not designed to replace humans. How long does it, does the task watcher thing, okay. So I think the task watcher thing you're talking about might be the task capture. That just takes as long as a process takes. So if you're looking to document a process, so you're logging into SAP and inputting some invoice details, however long a human takes, the task capture software will just be sitting there in the background, recording what the human's doing, and then outputting that information into a process, into a document. So you've got all your workflows documented, and then that can go into sort of the skeleton to start building the process out. And that's why they say that it just is so quick to get these things up and running. Okay, next question. If a process needs to change, how do you know if the bots are doing it? I might just get Ken to answer that one.
I assume that the question is around how do I know that the robots are actually doing that process?
Yes, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, and typically what we say is the robot actually should be part of the team that is doing the work today. So you don't sort of give it to a robot that sits in a back office and does nothing. We actually talk about the person responsible for the process, so that might be a team lead today, is still responsible. They've just got a robot as part of their team. And when you listen to Future of Work, they talk about things like in future, people will say to you, oh, how many people do you have working for you? And you say, I've got 3 staff and 2 robots. We actually have a customer who has a robot as part of one of their teams, and they actually do 360 feedback on each other, and that includes the robot. And in fact, the robot always gets a very high score because it takes all the boring work off the people in the team.
Thanks, Ken. There's another question here is, do you review the processes with us to see if they are needed or can be fixed using robots? So absolutely, as part of the automation advisory, Delv can work with you and go through all the ideas that your employees have submitted and work out which ones are best suited for automation. And if there's some there that really don't require any automation at all, we can advise you on that. And like Ken mentioned earlier in the piece, not every process or every idea is really suitable for automation. There is some criteria around that. And so we can certainly help advise you on which ones would be best to automate. Okay, I think that's all the questions. If anyone's got any other questions, oh, here we go, we've got some more coming through now. How do we get process efficiency if we're outsourcing it to robots? It seems like you can get stuck with an inefficient process. So that's a good question, and something that we highly recommend to all our customers is that you do a review of your processes before you automate them to ensure that they're the most efficient they can be before you automate them, because that statement is absolutely correct. You don't want to be automating an inefficient process, but also in saying that if a human would normally take 20 minutes to do it, a bot's going to take, you know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do it. And so you've already made efficiencies. But if you streamline that process and now it takes a human only 10 minutes to do, then a bot can get it done in probably under a minute. So you're going to, you know, exponentially improve your efficiencies. Can I use this as part of my AI initiatives? Yes, absolutely. Like Ken said, or robotic process automation can certainly now work with artificial intelligence like machine learning and those sorts of things to now deliver what they're calling hyper automation. So we can get end-to-end automation of processes. We've got robots learning as they go and improving, in the end, improving your customer experience or your employee experience, which is also is something that organisations are really looking for at the moment. They're also wanting to have their staff being more engaged with the work that they do and happier at work.
Yeah, I might just add to that. So
absolutely.
What we've seen globally is that with AI algorithms, it's actually can be cost prohibitive to actually connect to them, and then there's a lot of business decisions that I get a result from the AI algorithm, and what do I do with it? And so what RPA enables you to do is make it very easy for the robot to actually go and use the algorithms, and it makes it easy to configure and make decisions as a result of that algorithm. An example might be if I've got if I'm in insurance claims, I might get a claim come in and it goes to a robot, and what you want the robot to do is you want it to actually go and do fraud analysis. So it goes to a fraud analysis engine. You might at the same time want to do analysis of whether that customer is likely to have is likely to move after the claim, or you might even want to do an assessment of what the estimated costs of repair are, and you actually get an separate AI algorithm to do that. And so what you want is you want to make it really easy for the robot to go and use those different brains, so to speak. But also if it comes back and the confidence level or something is at a certain level, so let's say with fraud, if it's above a certain level, you might say, actually, I want a human to go and review this. And it makes it really easy to adjust those thresholds. So it really makes artificial intelligence much more useful than what it's been and accessible than what it has been in the past.
Thanks, Ken. There's another question that I'd like to get to, and it's, is this a hosted or managed service? We don't want to manage extra services. So UiPath does have a cloud offering. It is not hosted in Australia as yet, but Delv does have a hosted service that we can offer that is managed onshore. So if your organisation really is in a position to stand up a heap of infrastructure to support this type of rollout, then Delv can certainly help and provide services around that and provide the support to help your organisation get up and running quickly. Can I use in a retail environment? You can, but I might just throw to Ken because he's probably got some great real life examples for that.
In retail, so retail covers many things. So certainly the big retailers in Australia are all customers of ours. It really comes down to those manual processes and what do people do. So often in retail, what you want is you want people talking to customers, solving problems or doing upsell and stuff like that, and not processing. So it can be things like checking that inventory is available. So you might want to, you walk in at JB Hi-Fi today and say, oh, is it available? And they jump on the little notepad thing and do searches of the store and stuff like that. What you want them to be able to do is basically push a button and the robot or the software goes and does those searches. And so what you do is you get the robot to do that search so that customer can or that salesperson can continue to engage with you and sort of maybe ask more about what you're looking for or whatever. And then very quickly the robot can actually come back with a result. And that result, could be, it's available here, but you can get click and connect there, or we can have it in store here in 2 days' time, and sort of consolidate that information from a number of different systems and present it in a way that is easy for the salesperson to consume.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, one more question. I will quickly answer this. Do you use it internally? Absolutely, we do. We have Automation Hub up and running within our own organisation, allowing our employees to come up with ideas for automation. And we've got quite a list at the moment we're trying to get through. We've already automated some simple processes for registering of SIM cards and those sorts of things on websites. So we are very big on this, and we have our own internal centre of excellence to try and ensure that we are delivering automation within our own organisation to a premium level. And then that will also allow us to do that for our customers. So thank you. Okay, all right, we'll move on. And we'll wrap up now. So thank you very much for joining today. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first in a series of webinars that Delv will be hosting with our partners. And the next ones coming up in the next few weeks are Safety in a New World, Activating Your Remote Workforce, and Human-Centered Security. So for more information, please visit our website at delv.com, email us at info@delv.com, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We would love to hear from you. And I'd like to just thank you again for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you, and I hope to speak to people soon. Thank you and enjoy.